They watched in horror as the human plunged into the wreckage, surely to save a doomed predator. But when the creature emerged, limp and wounded in the human's arms, they realized with stunned silence, this enemy was already learning its new name. The alarm blared through the corridors of the Artemis Venture, red lights pulsing in urgent rhythm. Dr. Mira Liang looked up from her microscope, where she'd been examining early spring plant samples from Proxima Centauri's fourth moon. Her hand instinctively reached for the communication panel on her lab coat. "All personnel to command bridge," came Captain Toros's gravelly voice. "Emergency rescue signal detected. Priority Alpha." Mira's heart quickened. Priority Alpha meant life forms at imminent risk. She secured her samples, locked the laboratory protocols, and hurried toward the command bridge. The metal hallways of the research vessel bathed in alternating blue-white light and emergency red. The Artemis Venture drifted near the Theros A7 star system, primarily engaged in biological specimen collection and rescue missions. The ship's interior reflected its purpose: sleek, metallic corridors, illuminated by soft blue lighting. Laboratories equipped with specimen tanks and portable DNA analyzers. It was the perfect balance of hard science and humanitarian mission. When Mira arrived at the command bridge, several crew members were already assembled. Captain Toros, an Ixian with reptilian features and scales that caught the light as he moved, stood at the center console. His stoic demeanor never wavered, even in crisis. Beside him, Lyrira, the Kirin engineer, was clicking rapidly, a sign of agitation in her insectoid species. Dr. Arlo Hayes, the ship's neurological specialist, was reviewing data streams with characteristic detachment. "Distress signal from the cargo vessel, Odyssey Pride," Toros announced. "They've crashed on Therafor's surface. Most crew evacuated via escape pods. But..." He paused, large eyes narrowing. "They report a creature still trapped inside." "What kind of creature?" Mira asked, stepping forward. Lyrira's mandibles clicked. "Unknown. Biosignature readings indicate one living entity within the wreckage. Life signs fluctuating but present." Dr. Hayes enlarged the thermal imaging on the main display. "At least 8 large heat signatures moving around the crash site," he said. "Local predators, most likely. Therafor is mostly desert, barely habitable," Toros stated flatly. "And those heat signatures match known predator patterns. The risk assessment is extreme." "We don't know what's trapped in there," Lyrira clicked nervously. "The sand deserts of Therafor host massive four-legged killers with metal-strength claws. They've torn the transport ship apart." "It could be an injured crew member," Dr. Hayes said hesitantly. "Or an unknown dangerous entity. We need to decide quickly." Mira studied the biosignature data. Whatever was in that wreckage was alive and in distress. "Our mission is to preserve life," she said firmly. "We can't abandon whatever's down there without attempting rescue." Toros's scaled brow furrowed. "This isn't a standard rescue. Dr. Liang, every indicator suggests maximum danger. The risk may not be justified." "If we don't try, that life is lost for certain," Mira countered. "I believe we can manage the risk with proper precautions." The command bridge fell silent as all eyes turned to Captain Toros. His species prized safety and order above all else. After several tense moments, he nodded curtly. "Dr. Liang will lead a small team, 3 people only. Lyrira, you'll accompany her, along with Kex, our security specialist. Prepare for immediate departure. Full terrain armor, tranquilizer weapons. In and out. No heroics." As the meeting dispersed, Mira felt anxiety building in her chest. At 32, she was the only Earthborn human aboard the vessel, quieter than most, but with a deep compassion that often influenced her decisions. Now, she would be leading a dangerous rescue mission to save an unknown entity. Lyrira approached, her compound eyes reflecting the emergency lights. "You realize we might die for something that wants to eat us?" Mira nodded solemnly. "Or we might save something that deserves a chance. Either way, I won't leave any living creature behind if there's a possibility of rescue." As they prepared for descent, Mira couldn't shake a foreboding feeling. But her resolve remained unshaken. Whatever awaited them on Thera 4, she would face it with determination and compassion. The shuttle bay hummed with activity as Mira, Lyrira, and Kex prepared for their descent to Thera 4. They donned custom terrain armor, designed to withstand the harsh desert environment. The suits featured reinforced plating, internal cooling systems, and built-in biosensors. Mira checked her tranquilizer rifle and high-capacity sedation canisters, non-lethal but powerful enough to subdue large predators. "Thermal imaging shows the local fauna becoming more active," Kex reported, his Ixian features set in rigid concentration. "The crash site is drawing them in. We need to move quickly." The shuttle detached from the Artemis venture with a gentle shudder. Through the viewport, Mira watched as the research vessel grew smaller against the backdrop of stars. Below them, Thera 4's surface came into focus, a vast landscape of red sand and rocky outcroppings, harsh and unforgiving. "Landing site selected," Lyrira announced, mandibles clicking rhythmically as she piloted the craft. 1 kilometer from the crash, close enough for quick access, far enough to avoid attracting additional predators. The descent was rough, turbulence rattling the small craft as they entered Thera 4's atmosphere. Heat signatures on their monitoring equipment showed several large forms circling the crashed cargo ship. The shuttle touched down with a jolt, sending red dust billowing around them. When the external hatch opened, a blast of scorching air hit them, even through their climate-controlled suits. They could feel the intensity of the heat. The temperature reading displayed 53 degrees. The landscape before them was a desolate expanse of crimson sand and jagged rock formations, shimmering under the relentless sun. "Stay alert," Kex warned, taking point as they began their trek toward the crash site. Movement in the rock crevices. 11 o'clock. Mira activated her helmet's enhanced vision mode. In the distance, shadowy forms shifted between rock formations, massive creatures, low to the ground, emitting deep rumbling growls that reminded her of malfunctioning engines. "Theran Ravagers," Lyrira whispered, the translator converting her clicks into speech. "Apex predators. They hunt in packs and can tear through standard hull plating." The kilometer journey felt endless, each step laborious in the heavy armor and shifting sand. As they approached the crash site, the wreckage of the Odyssey Pride came into view, a once impressive cargo vessel now reduced to twisted metal and scattered debris. The ship's hull had been breached in multiple locations, evidence of both the crash and subsequent attacks. Mira activated her infrared scanner, sweeping the wreckage. "I'm detecting movement inside the cargo hold," she reported. "Single life form, weak but present." As they cautiously picked their way through the debris field, a sudden movement from behind a nearby rock formation caught their attention. 2 Theran Ravagers burst into view, 4-legged beasts the size of earth donkeys, with muscular builds and gleaming, dagger-like claws. Their hide appeared to be a mixture of scales and chitin, adapted perfectly to the desert environment. Lyrira reacted instantly, firing her laser deterrent. The beam struck the ground before the creatures, creating a small thermal explosion that forced them to retreat temporarily. But the disturbance sent vibrations through the sand, potentially alerting others. "We need to move now," Kex urged. "That won't hold them for long." They scrambled through a breach in the cargo ship's hull, entering a shadowy interior, strewn with fallen storage containers and damaged equipment. Mira's scanner led them deeper into the hold, where they found what they were looking for. Crouched in a corner, partially trapped beneath a fallen beam, was a creature unlike any Mira had seen before. It resembled a hybrid between a wolf and a large beetle, with 6 limbs and a back covered in crystalline spines that caught the light streaming through the damaged hull. One of its legs was clearly broken, and dark fluid, presumably blood, pooled beneath it. The creature snarled weakly as they approached, attempting to appear threatening despite its injuries. Its eyes, all 4 of them, darted between the rescue team members. Mira knelt slowly, keeping a safe distance. Through her binoculars, she looked into the creature's eyes and saw not mindless aggression, but a terrified living being. Something in that vulnerable gaze stirred deep compassion within her. "We're going to help you," she said softly, knowing the creature couldn't understand her words, but hoping her tone might convey her intentions. "Lyrira, prepare a temporary splint for that broken limb," she instructed. "Kex, we'll need to lift that beam." A distant roar echoed through the wreckage. Through a gap in the hull, they could see more Ravagers approaching, drawn by the commotion. "Life sign monitors show neural activity and heart rate stabilizing," Lyrira reported, studying her scanner. "It's still viable for transport." "Then let's move," Mira decided. "Rescue protocol is go." Outside, the Ravagers were closing in. Their window of opportunity was rapidly shrinking. Mira activated her kinetic harness, a device designed to temporarily augment lifting strength. With Kex's help, they strained against the heavy beam pinning the creature's leg. As it shifted, the creature let out a pained sound, somewhere between a growl and a whimper. Another Ravager appeared at the hull breach, its massive form blocking the light. Mira reached for her wide dispersal sedation canister and activated it, releasing a cloud of tranquilizing agent. The predator staggered, then collapsed outside the opening. "That won't stop the others for long," Kex warned, weapon at the ready. Lyrira worked quickly, applying a field dressing to the creature's wound and a temporary cast to the broken limb. "Ready for transport," she clicked, her movements precise despite her obvious tension. Together, they carefully lifted the injured creature. It was surprisingly heavy, its 6-limbed body awkward to carry. It growled weakly, but made no attempt to bite or claw at them, whether from weakness or some level of understanding. Mira couldn't tell. The journey back to the shuttle was a desperate race against time. The sedated Ravager had alerted others to their presence, and thermal scans showed multiple heat signatures converging on their position. They moved as quickly as possible, while bearing their injured cargo, the creature's crystalline spines occasionally catching on their armor. When the shuttle came into view, a surge of relief washed over Mira, but it was short-lived. 3 Ravagers had cut off their direct path, forcing them to detour around a rocky outcropping. "Cover me," Mira said, adjusting her grip on the injured creature. Kex fired several deterrent shots, creating enough of a distraction for them to make the final dash to the shuttle. The airlock cycled agonizingly slowly. Outside, the Ravagers circled, their predatory instincts overcoming their fear of the unfamiliar vessel. When the door finally sealed behind them, Mira allowed herself to breathe again. As the shuttle ascended toward the Artemis venture, Mira monitored the injured creature's vital signs. It had slipped into unconsciousness, but its life signs remained stable. Looking at its crystalline-spined form, now vulnerable in sedated sleep, she felt a strange connection forming, a responsibility toward this being she had risked everything to save. When the shuttle docked with the Artemis venture, the airlock doors opened to reveal Captain Toros and Dr. Hayes, waiting with a medical transport unit. Their expressions shifted from professional readiness to shock as they beheld the creature Mira and her team had rescued. "You brought that aboard my ship?" Toros's voice was low, dangerous. "It's injured and needs medical attention," Mira replied firmly. "It made no attempt to harm us once we freed it." "Are you certain this creature won't pose a threat to my crew?" Toros demanded, scaled brow furrowed deeply. "No one can be absolutely certain," Mira admitted. "But it deserves the chance to live. That's our mission." Dr. Hayes approached cautiously, scanner in hand. "Fascinating specimen. I've never seen anything quite like it. We should transfer it to the isolation chamber for examination and treatment." Several crew members had gathered to witness the unusual arrival. Kalar, the Ixian pilot, and Merrick, a human technician, exchanged concerned glances. "That thing looks like it could tear through half the crew once it wakes up," Merrick muttered. "It's a predator, not a pet," Kalar agreed. "We should terminate it now before it becomes a problem." Mira stepped between them and the injured creature. "If it dies because we chose to kill it, we're no better than the predators we fear. The Artemis venture exists to preserve life, not destroy it." Toros considered for a long moment, his reptilian features unreadable. Finally, he nodded sharply. "Take it to the high-security isolation chamber. Dr. Hayes, full biological assessment. Dr. Liang, since this was your rescue, you'll be responsible for monitoring it. At the first sign of danger to my ship or crew, we terminate. Is that clear?" "Perfectly," Mira agreed, relief washing through her. As the medical transport unit carried the unconscious creature toward the isolation chamber, Mira walked alongside, watching its labored breathing. For better or worse, their fates were now intertwined. The isolation chamber was a marvel of containment technology. Transparent walls reinforced with energy fields, atmospheric controls, and remote medical equipment that could be operated from outside the enclosure. The injured creature, now sedated and stabilized, lay on a medical platform at the center. Dr. Hayes worked methodically, collecting blood samples and scanning the creature's neural patterns while it remained unconscious. Mira observed from just outside the chamber, making notes on her tablet. "Preliminary analysis is fascinating," Hayes reported, reviewing the data streaming across his screen. "Its genetic structure shares characteristics with both mammalian and insectoid species, but it's entirely unique. The crystalline formations on its back contain compounds I've never encountered before." "What about its neural activity?" Mira asked. "Complex. Very complex," Hayes replied, adjusting his scanner. "Significant stress hormone levels, but no genetic markers that would indicate immediate hostility beyond normal predator instincts. Its brain structure suggests high intelligence for a non-sentient species." Mira approached the transparent wall, separating her from the creature. "I'd like to call it Egon," she said quietly. "It needs a name other than specimen or creature." Hayes raised an eyebrow but didn't comment on her choice to name it. "The sedation will wear off in approximately 6 hours. I recommend minimal personnel present when it regains consciousness." After Hayes departed, Mira remained at the observation window, studying Aegon's rhythmic breathing. There was something hauntingly beautiful about the creature, its crystalline spines catching the light, the alien yet somehow familiar contours of its face. "I know it's hard to trust me," she said softly, knowing Aegon couldn't hear her. "But if we don't try, this life is lost." She spent the next several hours researching similar species in the database, finding nothing that matched Aegon exactly. Occasionally, other crew members would pass by, casting wary glances at the isolation chamber. Near the 5-hour mark of Aegon's sedation, an unexpected power fluctuation rippled through the ship. The lights dimmed momentarily, and when they returned to full brightness, Mira noticed with alarm that the force field lock on the isolation chamber had temporarily disengaged. Just at that moment, Aegon's eyes fluttered open. Mira froze, her hand hovering over the emergency alert button. The creature raised its head groggily, disoriented from the sedation. Its 4 eyes focused on Mira through the transparent wall. It struggled to stand, but collapsed back down, whimpering from the pain of its still healing leg. Several crew members in the adjacent corridor witnessed Aegon's awakening and mistook its disoriented movements for aggression. One hit the security alert, sending a panic ripple through the ship's systems. Alarm lights began flashing, and the sound of security personnel running echoed through the hallway. Mira held her ground, maintaining eye contact with Aegon. The creature was fully conscious now, watching her with what appeared to be caution rather than aggression. It limped toward the transparent barrier, tilting its head in a manner reminiscent of a curious dog. In that moment, Mira saw something unexpected. Aegon was responding to her voice and presence, recognizing her from the rescue. There was intelligence in those alien eyes, and something more, a tentative trust forming. Security personnel arrived, weapons drawn and aimed at the isolation chamber. Captain Toros pushed through the group, his expression thunderous. "Step away from the containment field, Dr. Liang," he ordered. Instead, Mira raised her hand in a calming gesture and spoke a single word to Aegon. "Sit." To everyone's astonishment, including Mira's own, Aegon lowered itself into a sitting position, its tail-like appendage moving slightly in what could almost be interpreted as a wag. Absolute silence fell over the assembled crew. The security team's weapons remained raised, but uncertainty had replaced determination in their postures. They were witnessing something none had expected, a supposedly dangerous predator responding to a simple command. "It understands you," Dr. Hayes whispered, his scientific detachment momentarily forgotten. "Not exactly," Mira replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "But it's choosing to trust me. That's the beginning of understanding." Captain Toros signaled for the security team to lower their weapons, though they remained at the ready. "Explain what just happened, Dr. Liang." "I believe Aegon, the creature, is forming a bond," Mira said. "Similar to how canines on Earth formed social bonds with humans thousands of years ago. It recognizes me as the one who saved it, and it's responding to that connection." Dr. Hayes hurried to his console, reviewing neural scan data. "Remarkable. The hormone levels are shifting, stress markers decreasing, while bonding hormones similar to oxytocin in Earth mammals are increasing. It's a physiological response to Dr. Liang's presence." "Are you suggesting this predator is becoming domesticated?" Toros asked skeptically. "Not exactly domesticated," Mira clarified, "but it's adapting its survival programming. Instead of seeing us as threats or prey, it's recognizing the potential for cooperation." Lyrira, who had been observing silently, clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. The creature, Aegon, could have attacked during the rescue or when it first awoke. It didn't. That suggests at least basic reasoning capabilities. The crisis averted, the crew slowly dispersed. Though conversations about the unusual guest aboard the Artemis venture continued throughout the ship, opinion remained divided. Some, led by Mira, believed they were witnessing an extraordinary transformation. Others, including Toros and several security personnel, remained cautious, suggesting the behavior might be temporary or misleading. Dr. Hayes continued his analysis, sharing his findings with Mira later that evening. Preliminary brain chemistry analysis shows significant increases in bonding hormones when you're present, similar to the oxytocin response in Earth dogs when they interact with their human companions. The survival programming is literally being rewritten by these chemical changes. "So it's not just temporary sedation effects?" Mira asked. "No," Hayes confirmed. "This appears to be a genuine neurological shift. Of course, we'll need continued observation to confirm the pattern holds." Over the next several days, Mira spent hours with Aegon, gradually introducing basic commands: sit, stay, come, which the creature learned with surprising speed. Once Dr. Hayes confirmed there were no contagion risks, Mira was allowed limited physical contact with Aegon, always under supervision. The creature's wounds were healing well, its broken limb mending faster than expected. It showed curiosity about toys and objects Mira introduced into its environment, displaying problem-solving abilities and memory retention that impressed even the skeptics. Not everyone was convinced. However, during a routine examination, Lyrira noticed something concerning. "It's mimicking your breathing patterns," she clicked anxiously to Mira. and it makes sounds that approximate your voice tones when you're not present. I'm concerned it might be gathering information about our respiratory systems, perhaps identifying vulnerabilities. Or it might simply be forming stronger bonds through mimicry, Mira countered. Many social species use imitation as a form of connection. Captain Toros remained cautious. A predator can learn to deceive, he warned during a progress meeting. Don't forget its wild nature. Dr. Liang, your optimism could endanger this entire vessel. Alone in her quarters that night, Mira struggled with her own doubts. Was she being naive, projecting her own hopes onto a creature that might simply be adapting for survival? Or was she witnessing something truly remarkable, the capacity for trust and connection across species boundaries? She had no answers, only a growing conviction that what they were learning from Aegon might change understanding between all species. 3 months passed aboard the Artemis venture. Aegon's recovery progressed remarkably well, and the creature had become an unofficial member of the crew, albeit one that remained in the modified isolation chamber when not directly supervised by Mira. The chamber had been equipped with enrichment items, and Aegon had demonstrated increasing intelligence and social awareness. Most of the crew had grown accustomed to Aegon's presence. Some, like Dr. Hayes, had developed a scientific fascination with the creature. Others maintained a respectful distance but acknowledged that their initial fears seemed unfounded. Captain Toros had relaxed some restrictions, allowing Aegon limited access to certain areas of the ship under Mira's supervision. The captain's skepticism hadn't vanished entirely, but it had been tempered by observation. On the 93rd day after Aegon's rescue, an emergency transmission interrupted the ship's routine operations. Captain Toros called the senior crew to the command bridge. "Distress signal from the Celestine mining station on Lanero Prime," he announced. His scaled features tense. "They're under attack by a pack of wild Theran ravagers, the same species we encountered on Therafour. The station's perimeter defenses are failing, and they have civilians trapped inside." "How did ravagers get to Lanero Prime?" Lyrira clicked nervously. "It's 2 systems away from their native habitat." According to the station manager, they were keeping several ravager cubs as pets, Toros replied, his disgust evident. "When the adults tracked them there, they attacked the station. The miners didn't understand they were dealing with a highly social pack species." Mira processed this information with growing concern. "They've essentially kidnapped their children," she murmured. "No wonder they're attacking." Toros studied the tactical display. "We can reach them in 17 hours, but by then, the station's defenses might be completely compromised." After a moment of contemplation, he turned to Mira. "Dr. Liang, would Aegon be able to communicate with the wild ravagers? Could the connection you've established be leveraged?" The question caught Mira by surprise. "You want to bring Aegon to the mining station? If this master pet bond you've established is real, Aegon might be able to mediate," Toros explained. "It's a risk, but it might save lives." Lyrira clicked in alarm. "That's an extremely dangerous protocol. We'd be releasing a potentially dangerous creature into a volatile situation." "And if we don't," Mira countered, "an entire mining station could be destroyed. We have to try." After intense debate, the plan was approved. The Artemis venture altered course for Lanero Prime, accelerating to maximum safe speed. Mira spent the journey preparing Aegon, reinforcing commands and attempting to communicate the importance of what they were about to undertake. When they arrived at Lanero Prime, the situation had deteriorated further. The mining station's main gate had been breached, and ravagers were attempting to force entry through multiple points. Terrified transmissions from the station personnel painted a grim picture of their chances without immediate intervention. The landing party consisted of Mira, Captain Toros, Kex, and 2 additional security officers, with Aegon secured by a specialized harness that Mira could release remotely. They touched down near the fractured perimeter wall, where at least 15 ravagers were gathered for another assault. "This is madness," Kex muttered, checking his weapon for the third time. "Let's hope it's inspired madness," Mira replied, her hand resting reassuringly on Aegon's head. As they disembarked, the Ravagers immediately detected their presence, several breaking off from the main group to investigate. Mira released Aegon from the restraint harness, whispering, "It's your turn now." Aegon stepped forward, positioning itself between the landing party and the approaching Ravagers. It emitted a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through the ground beneath their feet. The wild Ravagers froze, their aggression momentarily suspended by confusion. Aegon advanced slowly toward the pack, continuing to vocalize, a complex series of rumbles, whines, and clicking sounds that seemed to form a primitive language. The wild Ravagers responded with their own vocalizations, creating what sounded to Mira like a conversation without words. "It's working," Toros whispered incredulously. "They're communicating." Aegon led Mira toward the largest Ravager, clearly the alpha of the pack. The massive creature towered over Aegon, its crystalline spines fully extended in a threat display. Aegon lowered its head submissively, then gently nudged Mira's hand with its muzzle, a symbolic gesture that seemed to convey, "This one is my ally." The Alpha Ravager stared at Mira with 4 piercing eyes, unmoving for several heart-stopping moments. Then, almost imperceptibly, it dipped its head, not submission, but acknowledgement. The pack's unified howling ceased, replaced by cautious silence. "They're waiting," Mira realized aloud. "They want their cubs returned." A communication was established with the mining station, and the situation explained. The station manager initially resisted, claiming the cubs were valuable specimens, but Captain Toros was unequivocal. "Return them immediately, or we cannot guarantee your safety." Under armed escort, 7 Ravager cubs were brought out from the station's containment area. The moment they were released, they bounded toward the adult pack, reuniting with what were presumably their parents. Watching the reunion, Mira felt tears welling in her eyes. The universal nature of family bonds transcended species. The miners emerged cautiously from the station, shocked to see the previously rampaging predators now calm and attentive. "We didn't realize," the station manager admitted, his voice shaking. "We thought they were just interesting specimens. We didn't understand they were children." A cultural misunderstanding with nearly fatal consequences, Captain Toros stated flatly. "These aren't specimens to be collected. They're an intelligent, social species with strong family bonds." The Alpha Ravager approached the station manager, who trembled visibly. But instead of attacking, it simply stared at him before turning away, leading its pack and the recovered cubs back toward the wilderness. As the Artemis Venture prepared to depart Lanero Prime, the mood aboard was contemplative. The mining station had been saved, and a massacre averted, thanks to the unlikely bond between Mira and Aegon. Captain Toros formally recognized Aegon as a provisional crew member during the departure briefing. "It appears humans have perspectives we hadn't considered," he acknowledged to Mira privately. "Your instinct to save rather than destroy has proven valuable." Lyrira's mandibles clicked softly as she observed Aegon, sleeping peacefully in its now much larger quarters. "Perhaps it takes time to learn trust," she admitted. "For all of us." Dr. Hayes continued his scientific documentation, though his clinical detachment had softened. "A successful living experiment," he concluded in his report. "But ongoing observation of the neurochemical processes will be essential." That evening, Mira sat beside Aegon's resting form, watching the rise and fall of its breathing. The creature had come so far from the injured, frightened being they'd rescued from the wreckage. In saving Aegon, they discovered something profound about connection across boundaries of species and understanding. "We've proven something important," she said softly to the drowsing creature. "Even the fiercest predator can become family when given the chance." Aegon opened one eye lazily, regarding Mira with what she now recognized as affection. It shifted slightly, resting its head against her leg in a gesture of trust that needed no translation. Beyond the viewport, stars streaked by as the Artemis venture continued its journey of discovery. Aboard the ship, an unlikely friendship had changed perspectives and saved lives, a testament to the power of compassion and the unexpected bonds that could form when different worlds collided. Morning on the Artemis venture began like any other. The night cycle lights gradually brightened to simulate dawn, and the ship's systems hummed with their usual efficiency. For Mira, however, each day now included a new routine: morning checks on Aegon's physical condition and mental stimulation exercises designed to further develop their communication. She entered Aegon's quarters, which had evolved from a sterile isolation chamber to a comfortable habitat with various enrichment features. Dr. Hayes had insisted on maintaining certain security protocols, but the environment now reflected Aegon's status as more than just a specimen. "Good morning," Mira called, smiling as Aegon immediately perked up at the sound of her voice. The creature bounded over, its formerly broken leg now fully healed, showing no sign of the injury that had nearly claimed its life. Dr. Hayes arrived shortly after, carrying his usual diagnostic equipment. "How is our patient today?" he asked, already scanning Aegon's vital signs. "Energetic and responsive," Mira replied, demonstrating a series of commands that Aegon followed with impressive precision. "The communication exercises are showing real progress." Hayes nodded, reviewing the data on his tablet. Neural activity continues to evolve in fascinating ways. The language center of the brain shows increased activity compared to baseline readings from 3 months ago. It's as if Aegon is developing a new neural pathway specifically for interspecies communication. "Not just mimicry, then?" Mira asked, remembering Lyrira's earlier concerns. "No, this appears to be genuine adaptive learning," Hayes confirmed. "Similar to how human children develop language capabilities, but accelerated and highly focused on nonverbal cues." Their conversation was interrupted by Captain Toros's voice over the ship-wide communication system. "Senior staff to the command bridge. Priority message incoming from Central Command." Mira exchanged a glance with Hayes. "I'll complete Aegon's session later," she said, giving the creature a reassuring pat before following Hayes to the bridge. The command bridge was already crowded when they arrived. Captain Toros stood at the central console, his usually impassive features showing subtle signs of tension. Lyrira was at her engineering station, mandibles working nervously. "Central Command has assigned us a new mission," Toros announced once all senior staff had assembled. "A research outpost on Proxima Delta has gone silent. Their last transmission reported unusual seismic activity and the discovery of a previously unknown species." A holographic display appeared above the console, showing the outpost's location and the limited data from their final transmission. Grainy footage showed something moving in the shadows, a form similar enough to Aegon to cause a ripple of murmurs among the crew. "Is that another shadow-fanged ravager?" Kalar asked, using the classification name that had been assigned to Aegon's species. "Unknown," Toros replied. "But the similarities are notable. Given our unique experience, we've been tasked with investigating both the outpost's silence and this potential new species discovery." All eyes turned to Mira, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Could their experience with Aegon provide an advantage in this new mission? "I believe Aegon could help us," she said, addressing the implied question. "If this is a related species, having Aegon present might facilitate peaceful contact. Or it might trigger territorial aggression," Lyrira countered, her translator conveying the clicking concern in her voice. "We can't assume all species with similar morphology will behave identically, which is precisely why Dr. Liang's expertise is vital to this mission," Toros stated. "She has demonstrated an ability to build trust with a previously unknown species. That skill may prove essential." The mission was set. The Artemis venture would reach Proxima Delta in approximately 4 days. During that time, Mira intensified her training sessions with Egon, focusing on commands that might be useful in potentially dangerous situations. Dr. Hayes developed a specialized portable scanner to help identify biological similarities between Aegon and whatever they might encounter at the outpost. If they share significant genetic markers, your theory about communication potential could be validated, he told Mira. On the 3rd day of their journey, Mira found Lyrira observing one of her training sessions with Aegon. The Kirin engineer had maintained a polite distance from Aegon since the Laniro Prime incident. Her initial skepticism softened, but not entirely erased. "You've accomplished something remarkable," Lyrira admitted, her compound eyes reflecting Aegon's crystalline spines. "In my culture, predators are to be avoided or eliminated. The concept of partnership with them is unusual." "Perhaps that's because no one tried," Mira suggested. "Fear often prevents us from discovering possibilities." Lyrira's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "My ancestors would say you're taking an unnecessary risk, but they would also value the knowledge gained." After a pause, she added, "I would like to assist with the outpost mission. My engineering expertise might help determine what caused their communications failure." "I'd welcome your help," Mira replied, surprised and pleased by the offer. When they arrived at Proxima Delta, the outpost's silence took on an ominous quality. The facility appeared intact from orbit, with no signs of structural damage or conflict. Power readings indicated the systems were operational, yet all attempts at communication went unanswered. The landing party consisted of Mira, Captain Toros, Lyrira, Kex, and, after considerable debate, Aegon, secured with a specialized harness that included remote monitoring of its vital signs and stress levels. As their shuttle descended toward the outpost's landing pad, Mira felt Aegon grow tense beside her. The creature's spines rippled with an iridescent quality she had come to recognize as alertness. "Aegon senses something," she reported to Toros. "Heightened awareness, but not yet aggression." The landing pad was deserted when they arrived. The outpost doors were sealed but unlocked, suggesting the facility hadn't been deliberately secured during an emergency. Inside, the corridors were eerily silent, the standard hum of environmental systems the only sound. "Life signs detected in the main laboratory," Kex reported, checking his scanner. "Multiple signatures, but they're unusual." Aegon strained against the harness, not in an attempt to flee, but seeming eager to move forward. Its behavior reminded Mira of search animals she had worked with on Earth, purposeful rather than fearful. "I think Aegon wants to lead us," she said, looking to Toros for permission. The captain considered briefly, then nodded. "Maintain control, but allow some guidance. Kex, stay alert." With Aegon now leading their advance, they moved through the facility toward the laboratory. The creature moved with confidence, occasionally pausing to sample the air with quick inhalations. As they approached the lab doors, Aegon emitted a soft trilling sound Mira had never heard before. The laboratory doors slid open to reveal a startling scene. The research team, 7 humans and 2 Ixians, were huddled at one end of the room. At the other end, inside what appeared to be a hastily constructed containment field, were 3 creatures that resembled Aegon, but with notable differences. Their crystalline spines were blue rather than iridescent, and they had distinctive markings around their eyes. "Don't let that thing near them!" one of the researchers shouted, pointing at Aegon. "They've been hostile since we found them in the caverns below." Aegon strained forward, the trilling sound increasing in volume. The creatures in the containment field responded with similar vocalizations. "They're communicating," Mira realized. "Just like with the Ravagers on Laniro Prime." "Those aren't Ravagers," the lead researcher protested. "We classified them as Delta Spinebacks. They attacked 2 of our team members when we discovered their nest." Mira studied the situation, noting the fear in the research team's posture, but also the lack of aggression in the contained creature's current behavior. "Were you near their young when the attack occurred?" she asked, remembering the miner's mistake. The researcher's hesitation told her everything. "We collected some tissue samples from one of the smaller ones for study," he admitted reluctantly. "You threatened their offspring," Toros stated flatly, his Ixian directness cutting through the excuses. "Just like the miners on Lanero Prime." Mira turned to the research team. "We have experience with a similar species. I believe they're defending their young, not attacking without provocation. Where is the juvenile you took samples from?" After some resistance, the researchers revealed a separate containment area where a smaller version of the creatures was being kept, clearly distressed and showing signs of the sample collection procedures. "We need to return it immediately," Mira insisted, "and deactivate the containment fields. Aegon can help mediate, but only if we demonstrate good faith." The lead researcher protested vehemently, citing research protocols and the scientific value of their discovery. Captain Toros, however, was unmoved. "This is not a request," he stated. "Either cooperate, or we will override your systems and release them ourselves." Under Mira's guidance, a careful plan was implemented. The juvenile was brought out first, with Aegon positioned nearby, continuing its trilling vocalizations that seemed to have a calming effect on both the young creature and the adults. When the containment field was deactivated, the adult spinebacks rushed to their offspring, examining it carefully, but making no aggressive moves toward the humans. Aegon approached slowly, exchanging more complex vocalizations with the largest of the spinebacks. The interaction was remarkably similar to what had occurred with the Ravager Alpha on Lanero Prime, a negotiation without words. "They want access to their nest in the caverns," Mira interpreted, watching the creature's body language and Aegon's responses. "They were only in the outpost because their young was captured." With cautious optimism, the group escorted the Spineback family to the access point, leading to the underground caverns. As they departed, the lead creature turned back briefly, its four eyes focusing on Mira and Aegon with what appeared to be acknowledgement before disappearing into the darkness. The outpost researchers were simultaneously chastened and fascinated by what they had witnessed. "We never considered attempting communication," the lead researcher admitted. "We treated them as specimens rather than intelligent beings." "A common mistake," Toros observed. "One our own crew has learned to avoid, thanks to Dr. Liang's perspective." As they prepared to return to the Artemis venture, Lyrira approached Mira. "You were right," she clicked softly. "Fear prevented them from seeing possibilities. Perhaps it has prevented many of us from seeing them as well." Back aboard the ship, Mira spent a quiet moment with Aegon, reflecting on how far they had come since that desperate rescue on Thera 4. What had begun as compassion for an injured predator had evolved into a partnership that bridged species boundaries and saved lives. "You've taught us more than we've taught you," she told Aegon, who rested its head contentedly against her knee. "About trust, about communication, about seeing beyond our fears." In her report to Central Command, Mira recommended a new protocol for contact with unknown species, emphasizing respect, observation, and attempts at communication before classification or containment. She named it the Aegon Protocol, in honor of the creature that had changed their understanding of interspecies relationships. Captain Toros endorsed the protocol, adding his own observation. "Our mission to preserve life has been enhanced by recognizing the intelligence and social structures of species previously dismissed as mere predators." The bond between Dr. Liang and Aegon demonstrates that connection is possible across even the most unlikely boundaries. As the Artemis venture continued its journey through the stars, Aegon became not just a crew member, but a symbol of possibility, proof that with patience, respect, and compassion, even the most feared enemy could learn a new name: friend. 6 months after Aegon's rescue, The Artemis venture received a unique assignment from Central Command. They were to transport a delegation of xenobiologists to a newly established observation outpost on the edge of the Thera system, where increasing numbers of shadow-fanged ravagers had been documented. The delegation's goal was to study the species in its natural habitat, implementing the Egon protocol that had now become standard procedure for contact with potentially intelligent, non-humanoid species. The morning of the delegation's arrival, Mira found Captain Toros in the observation lounge, his scaled form silhouetted against the viewport stars. "Are you concerned about returning to Thera?" she asked, joining him at the window. "Not concerned," Toros replied thoughtfully. "Reflective. Perhaps 6 months ago, I would have considered this mission foolhardy, deliberately seeking contact with predators we once feared. Now, I find myself curious about what we might learn." "That's quite a shift in perspective," Mira observed with a smile. "Indeed," Toros acknowledged. "Your influence has been significant. Coming from the typically reserved Ixian, this was high praise." The delegation consisted of 5 xenobiologists from various worlds, each specializing in different aspects of non-humanoid intelligence. They boarded with evident excitement, having heard of Aegon's remarkable journey from wild predator to crew member. Dr. Alara Voss, the delegation's leader, could barely contain her enthusiasm when introduced to Aegon. "The reports hardly do justice," she exclaimed, observing how comfortably Aegon moved among the crew. "This represents a paradigm shift in xenobiology." "Aegon has been an exceptional case," Mira cautioned. "We shouldn't assume all members of the species will adapt as readily." "Of course," Voss agreed. "But you've proven it's possible, that's what matters." Before this, most experts believed predator species at this evolutionary stage were incapable of forming social bonds outside their own kind. As the Artemis venture approached the observation outpost, Mira noticed Aegon, becoming increasingly alert, often staring out viewports toward the planet below. During rest periods, the creature would emit soft, trilling sounds, similar to those it had used when communicating with the spinebacks. "I believe Aegon senses others of its kind," Mira reported during the pre-landing briefing. "There's a definite change in behavior, not distress, but awareness." "Could this complicate our mission?" Toros asked. "If Aegon feels pulled toward wild ravagers, might our influence be diminished?" "It's possible," Mira admitted. "But it's also an opportunity to observe how Aegon navigates between worlds, our structured environment, and the natural habitat of its species. That knowledge could be invaluable." The observation outpost was situated on a rocky plateau, overlooking a vast desert valley, where ravager packs had established territories. From reinforced observation blinds, researchers could document the creature's behaviors without disrupting their natural patterns. Upon landing, Aegon's excitement became palpable. The creature paced near the airlock, emitting occasional soft howls that echoed hauntingly through the ship's corridors. "Aegon recognizes this place," Dr. Hayes observed, monitoring the creature's vital signs. "Not the specific location, perhaps, but the sensory environment, the atmospheric composition, the gravity, the ambient sounds." The delegation established themselves at the outpost while Mira, Hayes, and Toros conducted an initial survey with Aegon secured by its specialized harness. From the main observation blind, they could see a ravager pack approximately 2 kilometers distant, 7 adults and what appeared to be 3 juveniles, moving across the desert floor with the fluid coordination of experienced hunters. Aegon watched intently, its crystalline spines shifting colors in patterns Mira had come to recognize as emotional responses. There was longing there, certainly, but also a complexity she couldn't fully interpret. "What are you thinking?" she murmured to Aegon, knowing there would be no verbal answer, but hoping to understand nonetheless. The next morning, Dr. Voss proposed an unprecedented experiment. "We'd like to observe Aegon's interaction with wild ravagers in a controlled setting," she explained. "A secure enclosure near their territory, with Aegon present but protected. It would provide invaluable data on recognition between domesticated and wild members of the species." Mira's protective instincts flared immediately. "That places Aegon at considerable risk. The wild ravagers might view it as an intruder or competitor. Or they might recognize one of their own," Voss countered. "Either way, the security protocols would ensure Aegon's safety while allowing us to document a first-of-its-kind interaction." After much debate, a compromise was reached. A reinforced observation post would be established at the territory boundary, with multiple layers of security. Aegon would be present, but could be extracted immediately if any signs of distress emerged. The day of the experiment arrived with tense anticipation. The observation post had been carefully positioned near a watering hole frequented by the Ravager pack. Mira remained at Aegon's side, monitoring every subtle change in its behavior. "Remember, at the first sign of aggression or distress, we abort," Toros reminded everyone. The captain had insisted on overseeing the operation personally. His former skepticism now transformed into cautious support. Hours passed with no Ravager sightings. The research team maintained their vigilance, instruments ready to document any interaction. Aegon remained alert but calm, occasionally trilling softly, as if calling out to distant kin. Near sunset, movement appeared on the horizon, the Ravager pack approaching the watering hole. They moved with predatory grace, crystalline spines catching the fading light. Aegon's behavior changed immediately, its posture becoming more attentive, vocalizations increasing in frequency. "They've detected Aegon's scent," Dr. Voss whispered, excitement evident in her voice despite her professional demeanor. "Watch the Alpha, the largest one. See how it's scenting the air?" The Alpha Ravager broke from the pack, approaching the observation post with cautious curiosity. It circled once, twice, evaluating the unfamiliar structure and the scents emanating from it. Then, it did something unexpected. It sat, just beyond the security perimeter, and emitted a trilling call remarkably similar to Aegon's. Aegon responded immediately, its entire body vibrating with the intensity of its reply. The conversation continued for several minutes, a complex exchange of sounds that none of the humans or other species present could interpret, but that clearly carried meaning between the Ravagers. "They're communicating," Mira breathed, amazed despite her months with Aegon. "Not just recognizing each other, actually sharing information." Gradually, other members of the wild pack approached, each adding their own vocalizations to the exchange. There was no aggression, no territorial display, only what appeared to be curiosity and recognition. "I believe they recognize Aegon as one of their kind, despite the time spent among us," Dr. Hayes suggested, recording every moment of the interaction. "The question is whether they perceive Aegon as still part of their social structure, or as something different now." The answer came unexpectedly. After nearly an hour of vocal exchange, the Alpha Ravager retreated several steps, then lowered its head in what appeared to be a gesture of acknowledgement, before leading the pack away from the watering hole. "What just happened?" Toros asked, his usually impassive features showing rare confusion. "I believe," Mira said slowly, processing what she had witnessed, "that they recognized Aegon has chosen a different pack, us. They acknowledged that choice without challenging it." Dr. Voss was ecstatic. "This confirms intelligence far beyond what we previously attributed to non-humanoid predator species. They have concepts of choice, of belonging, of recognizing another's path without rejecting them. This changes everything we thought we knew." That evening, as the research team excitedly compiled their observations, Mira sat with Aegon in quiet contemplation. The creature seemed content, resting its head on her lap, as it had done countless times aboard the Artemis venture. "You could have chosen to call out for rescue," she said softly, stroking the smooth area between Aegon's crystalline spines. "You could have signaled distress or longing to return, but you didn't." Aegon looked up at her with its 4 intelligent eyes, and Mira felt the now familiar sensation of connection that transcended verbal language. In that moment, she understood with certainty. Aegon had made its choice long ago, not from lack of options, but from genuine preference. The observation outpost became a permanent research station, with rotating teams of xenobiologists continuing to document Ravager behavior and occasionally facilitating controlled interactions with Aegon. The Artemis venture departed after 2 weeks, continuing its mission of exploration and rescue. In her final report to Central Command, Mira included a personal observation. What began as a desperate rescue of a wounded predator has evolved into a profound lesson about connection across boundaries we once thought impermeable. Aegon has taught us that intelligence, choice, and bonding exist in forms we barely recognized, and that our fear often blinds us to possibilities. The predator has indeed learned a new name, not just Aegon, but friend, crew member, and perhaps most importantly, teacher. As the Artemis venture journeyed toward its next assignment, Aegon stood beside Mira on the observation deck, both watching as the stars streaked past. Whatever adventures awaited them, they would face them together, a union of different worlds that had found common ground in compassion and trust. The once feared predator had learned not only a new name, but a new way of being, and in the process, had helped an entire crew discover that sometimes the most important boundaries to cross were those in their own minds.